Hello, welcome to Doomed to Fail. My name is Taylor. We are the podcast that brings you history's most notorious failures and epic disasters twice a week, every week. But before that, we are re releasing our first 26 episodes because those episodes we did in two stories in one show. So they were pretty long. So we decided to do twice a week and have two episodes a week. But we wanted them to be individual as well. So we've been re-releasing these. Basically, that's what's happening. And we're almost at the end. So it is episode 26, part one. And can you believe that it has been a year since the Titan submersible imploded? What a wild year 2023 into the first half of 2024 is and has been, and who knows what is next. And can you believe that someone else is saying that they're going to go down in another submersible to prove that it's safe? It's I don't know. Kind of feel like just don't go there. Since then, we've done a couple scary ocean, other stories as well. Forest did one on the blue hole, and yeah, no, just don't go. But join us for this episode to revisit the story of the Titan submersible, which, as you know, imploded on its way to the Titanic, and also the equally terrifying story of the Byford Dolphin incident, where some people were like above the water but pressurized, and then like a door opened and everybody exploded. It's real gory and weird. So enjoy these. This is almost the end, not of the show, but of our re-releases. And yeah, so if you have any feedback or questions, doomedtofailpod@gmail.com. Doomedtofailpod.com. And I'm sorry, I'll let you do it. Episode 26.
The matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
So Taylor,
Yeah.
this is our last week of anonymity.
I just went out and went to Walmart, just to be unrecognized in public for once. Fine. For the last
I
time.
I went and shook a stranger's hand at the grocery store. I was like, I'm never gonna have this chance again because we're gonna be so famous.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
we'll go ahead and kick things off. I'll make the intro. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where Taylor and I explore two relationships, one historic and one usually true crime, although our premise tends to change all the time, that are full
It
of
is what it
red
is.
flags. I'm Fars, joined here by Taylor. Hi, Taylor.
Hi, Fars. I'm so excited to be here. I know it's Sunday and it's late in the weekend. We usually record earlier, but you had your parents in town and I had to work yesterday and I've just this week I've been more tired than I've ever been in my whole entire life. So I feel like a human today. So I'm glad that we're doing this today.
This time, this moment, like this is exactly when I should be recording. I'm in the exact right headspace because, like,
Yeah.
yesterday I felt so rushed. The family was here. I had to take care of things, and
Hmm.
earlier this morning they were here, and now it's like they've been gone for like an hour and a half or so, and I can
Nice.
just like ease my way into like normal life again, you know? So this is the exact right time.
Yeah, one, my husband took the kids to the park because I hate the park. Fucking hate it. It's boring as shit. So he takes the kids to the park because the kids love it. And so
There you
obviously
go.
because they're children. But yeah, so it's nice. I've been home for a little bit, just kind of, and I've been home for like an hour by myself, and I haven't been listening to anything. I've just kind of been like trying to like get my mind around what I'm talking about this week, and I'm super excited to talk about it and to tell you. But
I
I've been like
wonder.
in a thing.
So, as usual, as everybody knows, Taylor and I never share what we're discussing beforehand, so I have no idea what Taylor's going to discuss, but I don't know why. I get the feeling that there might be like a through line
There's
in
always
this
a through
one.
line in farmers. Literally
There is.
always.
There is.
Always.
My stories are very unique, though, but we'll get to that in a second. I think today I go first. Is that right?
Yes.
So, why don't you tell us what your signature cocktail is, what your signature drink for your
Okay.
story?
Okay. I also want to just I'm going to do that in a second, I promise. But I also wanted to say part of the reason that I feel like I'm in this like crazy mind space at the moment is because like this whole week I've been reading this book on on what I'm going to talk about later, and I listened to it because like everyone, I have like a shit ton of stuff to do, but it was like 48 hours. So I was like in this book and I was like, bringing the kids to swim lessons and trying to get in my steps. I was like walking around the pool listening to this book and like taking notes in my notes app and like trying to like really be in it. So, and then I was reminded that I read this like dumb ass post on like Instagram or LinkedIn where some dude was like, exercise this much to do this. And he was like, and read one book a week, but audiobooks don't count. And I just wanted to say, fuck that guy. Because A, that's the advice in Clueless that Cher says. She says, let's read one non-school book a week. Do you remember that part? And she goes, my
No.
first my first book is Fit or Fat. You'll remember if you know. And then also that's like super dumb, but also at worst, it's like really ableist. Like some people can't focus on words. People, whatever. So anyway, I've been like, I think listening to this book actually put me like a lot further into the story. So that's why I've been kind of losing my mind. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then also, because we're here before you get started, I had another friend of ours that we know mutually try to mansplain whatever this to me, and they were like, "Oh, so for every episode, do you just like read a Wikipedia page?" And I was like, "No, I'm reading like a whole books, and I'm like learning a ton." And I just feel like in the past 6 months, I've learned so much, and I hope that you have too, and that other people have. So
Yeah,
I
I
want to add
have
that.
discovered that, there's a lot of stories that we've done before where I will look at the Wikipedia page and I'll read other content around it. And I'm like, the facts just, you're left up in the air in terms of like what's true and what's not. Because, I covered, what was the guy last week, the guy who killed Versace, and
Hmm.
Harper's Bazaar. I mean, I actually grown a new fascination and appreciation with magazines and the
Hmm.
amount of like actual research that goes into publishing certain articles. Like Harper's Bazaar did a like that is the source of truth for all this stuff. There was
Hmm.
another one I did. The Atlantic was a source of truth for like, and you look at the Wikipedia articles, for example, and they're just like taking these like broad swaths and copy pasting over from like actual
Right.
publications that are doing really legit research work, which is really, really interesting. So,
And I think
same
it sounds
page.
silly, but like then I'm like, oh, well, they got this from this article. You're like, oh, now that I've read more than one source on this thing, I'm like getting things. So anyway, it's super fun. So this week I am drinking cognac. Do you know what cognac is?
I've had cognac. Is Hennessy cognac?
Yes,
I've had
yes.
Hennessy.
Okay, yeah, because I was gonna. It's like it's a brandy, and brandy is distilled wine, which I didn't know or understand. I feel like I haven't had brandy, but I'm sure I have. But yeah, cognacs you might know are like Hennessy and Courvoisier.
Okay.
See. Anyway, so that's what I'm drinking.
That is
Um,
not a taste profile that I particularly enjoy,
because
but
it's
more
like
power to you.
sweet, right? Like sweeter than usual. Anyway, in real
It's
life,
like
I'm
it's
drinking Bud
almost like a
Lights.
liquor. It's like a liqueur liquor.
Right.
One of those things.
Anyway.
So
Anyway.
I, on the other hand, have just discovered that my local grocery store, HEB, for anybody that's in Texas, has a passion fruit sparkling water. I'm going to be drinking
Ooh,
that because it has nothing to do with my story, but I just enjoy it. So I'm
that's
going
great.
to go ahead and drink my little passion fruit fizzy water.
Good for you.
And then I'll go ahead and kick us off. And once again, normally I cover true crime. This week is a little bit different. Actually, it's a lot different. It's totally different. It's like exactly 180 degrees different. So it has nothing to do with true crime
Oh my
whatsoever.
God. What are you telling me?
Taylor, consistently, I think that we want to keep this show mostly evergreen. So we try not to cover super topical things that are in the news. And the reason why mine is different is because I'm going to do something. Because what's been in the news this past week has actually sparked my interest and curiosity in things. And I did a lot of
Mm-hmm.
research on stuff. So much of the rest of the country, I was following the Titanic submersible story very, very closely.
Uh-huh.
And mostly it's because I'm, one, fascinated by the ocean. Two, I always had a thing for the Titanic. Ever since I was a little
Everyone
kid, I've
does.
always
Yeah.
had a thing for the Titanic. When I went to Ireland, like I went to the Titanic. I deliberately detoured to go to the Titanic Museum because I'm just like that into it, and I find the story very, very compelling. Has nothing to do with Jack and Rose or James Cameron. Like this is like predates all that stuff.
Good for you.
And the third one is that both the ocean and the Titanic, the story and where the ship currently lies, terrify me to no end.
So scary.
And so scary. But as a lover of all things horror, I'm naturally drawn to things that terrify me, and this terrifies me.
Okay.
So, in the spirit of the ever evolving premise here, I'm going to discuss a red flaggy relationship that almost all of us have at some point in our lives, and that is our relationship with hubris.
Okay. Whoa.
So, whoa, I know, I'm getting super heady with it here. So, hubris, the word, is derived from the ancient Greek word for pride, insolence, outrage, and is defined as a characteristic of one who has excessive pride or self-confidence. Usually, the red flaggy parts about this are minimal in our day-to-day lives. Maybe you have hubris that you're the best looking person, or that you're the smartest, or that you made the right decisions, whatever. Usually it ends in being embarrassed or fired or losing a relationship. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
When it starts mattering is when it impacts your life and the life of those around you. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, that happens when it happens in a consequential manner, like it did this last week with the Titan Submersible and with the Titanic itself. That happens in an engineering capacity where there's
Mm-hmm.
an immense amount of hubris towards the engineering prowess of humanity, and then it leads to horrible consequential things that end up impacting people's lives. The reason I brought the whole Titan Submersible thing up was because I heard something that James Cameron said this week about how ironic it was that the Titan is on the seafloor next to the Titanic, because neither leaders of those two vessels heeded all the warnings and instead relied on their own hubris to move forward, resulting in the death of others. So I'm actually doing two stories today.
What is happening?
They'll be relatively quick, though, I promise. But they're gonna have to do with how humanity's hubris and engineering resulted in horrible, horrible tragedies.
Awesome.
And these are gonna be a little bit rare. Like, these are not gonna be like super obvious ones. Well, one of them might, but the other one I definitely don't think people know about.
Cool. That sounds awesome. I am exactly the right age and the right sexual orientation for the movie Titanic to have destroyed my life.
I totally believe, because first that was our vision of like, this is romance. This is how
It
romance is
destroyed
done.
my life. Yeah, no, unbelievable, unbelievable the amount of times I saw the movie in the theater. I like how many times I like would like record on the radio. You know how remember they play the Celine Dion song with like words in it, like from the movie?
There you go.
Oh my God, it ruined my life. I can't wait.
Look,
Interesting.
the two stories I'm going to cover the more obscure one first. That one, also, Taylor, just so you know, a part of me was like, is Taylor going to get mad at me for doing this? Because I'm not doing true crime. And so I don't know if you're mad at me or not, but
I'm
I
already
really,
super mad at you.
I know, I can
For
see you're
huge.
squinting your eyebrows. So the first one is an incident that is known as the Byford Dolphin accident. Have you heard of this one?
No.
Cool. Okay, great.
Wait,
Then I got you.
wait, stop. Were you with
Yes.
us when we watched that movie? Okay, we have that horror movie club with our friends, and we watch scary movies. And there's that movie with George C. Scott where he trains a dolphin to kill the president of the United States.
I didn't see that one. I skipped that one.
Oh my God, it's so bad, and I love George C. Scott so much, but it's the whole thing. So,
George C. Scott is amazing.
ugh.
This has nothing to do with dolphins.
Oh,
Yes, it's just called the Byford Dolphin incident. But thank you. I'm going to start with an old mainstay of oceanic disasters, which are oil rigs. In the case of the Byford Dolphin, that is the name of a natural gas rig, but it's essentially the same concept as an oil rig. Humans have been very unique, or we are generally very unique in our capability of going super above and beyond the laws of nature to get what we want. And oil rigs are a great example of this. Researching this really reminded me like how incredibly easy our lives are. Like, people do
hmm
the most insane labor and work so that we have gasoline in our cars, so that we have plastic, so
right.
we have like, it's insane what people are willing to put their lives to doing to let us have the basic modern conveniences we have, and this is a good example of that. So in the case of the rig Byford Dolphin, this was positioned in the North Sea in November of 1983.
Okay.
The rig required work to be done at or near the seafloor, and it required divers to do that. Given that the depths that we're talking about here are incredible, huge, massive, we learned all about that this week. This type of diving that the people had to do on the Byford Dolphin is called saturation diving. Have you ever heard of this before?
Mm-mm.
Okay. It is a
I I
super,
I snorkeled once and I was scared. So
it's
like,
terrifying. It's terrifying.
not for me.
Like, guys, go watch YouTube videos of saturation divers and
Oh my God,
turn the lights off and like just, it is worse than any horror movie you'll ever watch because it's
I hate
real.
it. Okay, tell me more.
Saturation diving is like a highly, highly, highly technical skill version of diving. So out of all commercial divers in the United States, there's only about 330 or so that are saturation divers right now. So it is, these people get paid a lot of money and they take a lot of risks to do what they're doing. As we learned with a time disaster, the lower a person or an object goes in the water column, the higher the outside pressures are that are acting on that body. That's true for all parts of the body, including oxygen and nitrogen in our bloods and our lungs. The deeper you go, typically considered somewhere around 130 feet, the more those things get compressed and the longer you have to wait before coming to the surface.
Right. Or you get the bends.
Or you get the bends. So if you go straight from, let's hypothetically say 500 feet below sea level, directly to the top, you get the bends. You get decompression sickness, which results in the nitrogen in your body expanding rapidly from all the negative pressure around you, which results in damage to your blood vessels, blocks the nausea, confusion, you lose motor function, you die. Like, you almost certainly die as a result of this.
Yeah.
To prevent this, deep sea divers have to stop at certain intervals to go back to the surface safely. The exact interval varies depending on the person, the gas combination they're breathing, how long they've been down there, the temperature of the water, and a host of other, like, this is not hard science. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into this. What I've read is that typically it takes between 2 and 3 minutes per 10 to 15 feet of depth to go back to the surface.
So it has to be like slow.
It's slow. So for example, for a 500-foot dive, that would mean if it's like a short, like you go straight down to 500 feet, you do something, you touch the ground, and then you go back up, it takes about 2 hours to go back up. But these guys aren't touching the ground and going back up. They're spending 8 to 10 hours on the sea floor working, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, companies want to mitigate how much time is lost every day by people going down to the bottom, working, then going back up. Because if you actually decompress every single day, it would be a nightmare for the divers. It would be a nightmare for the companies. The profit margins would be, like, all of it's bad. Like, none of it's good.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of doing that and decompressing every single day and wasting days of work, what they do instead is they stay in a pressurized tube called a diving bell that maintains the outside pressure of the depths they're working at. So if you can imagine it, there's this like object, like this spherical thing that gets dropped below the ship over the workstation on the seafloor. It maintains the pressure of the seafloor. You swim out of it, go to the place where you're working, swim back into it, and then the pressure maintains. You go back up, you dock with the ship, and then you're good. And then you just stay there. Basically, you stay pressurized.
I hate it.
So when they're done diving, or when they're done working, they go back in the diving bell, that gets wrenched up to the surface of the dock or whatever it is, and there is what is called the pressurized living system or a diving chamber that sits on the ship or the oil rig, and that's where the divers leave the dive bell to go into to live, sleep, work, do whatever, and get back in the diving bell the next morning and go back down. It's all pressurized.
So they're in like a pressurized place, but like above the water.
Yeah, they're on the deck. They're on the ship deck. But the ship deck, they're in a chamber on the ship deck that is pressurized as though they're 1,000 feet below the surface.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the way it works is that typically, if you're a saturation diver, you can work about 4 weeks, give or take, in these conditions. So you stay fully pressurized for 4 weeks, and then gradually, once you're done with the job, they start increasing the pressure slowly, and that is basically reflective of them swimming further up in the water column until they're in atmospheric pressure of 1. Make sense?
Yes, but do you feel normal?
Yeah. Your body gets adapted to it because you're breathing a special combination, right? Like, you're not actually, like, it's the oxygen at that level is so compressed that they have to mix with other stuff for you to be able to breathe normally. But yeah, you do feel normal.
Wow.
On the Byford Dolphin, there were 4 saturation divers. I'm going to use their first name because 2 of them are Scandinavian, and that is a lot of consonants in a row that I'm not going to even try and pronounce. Totally. Their names are Edwin, Roy, Bjorn, and Charles. Guess which 2 are the Scandinavian ones?
Bjorn.
Good.
And Roy.
Trolls. Women trolls.
Charles?
No, Trulls.
Oh,
Trolls.
I said Charles, and I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the diving chamber on the Byford Dolphin had 2 parts. So there was basically one section that was a kitchen, and then another section that was like a living area and a bedroom area. So on this day in November in 1983, 2 of the divers, Roy and Edwin, they were resting in the dive chamber. They were sleeping, essentially.
Underground or on the boat?
On the boat.
Okay.
Yeah. On that day, so they do in shifts, right? So Bjorn, 2 go down, they do the work, they go back in the diving bell, go back, hook up the chamber, and then they're up there, and then the other 2 come back in, and they go back down. That's the way it works. Bjorn and Trulls came up via the diving bell. Their day was done, they came up via the diving bell. At this point, all four men have been compressed to an atmosphere of 9. So their atmospheric pressure is 9 times the pressure that me and you experience at sea level, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Outside the diving chamber are 2 dive tenders whose job it is to safely dock the diving chamber to the diving bell. So make sure the 2 pieces are connected, make sure they're pressurized, and usually the way they connect them is through this thing called the trunk. So there's a passageway, the diving bell goes up, it fits onto this spherical thing, it's called the trunk. That spherical thing connects to the diving chamber. Then the dive tender makes sure all 3 are pressurized to the same amount, then they can pass through from one to the other.
Okay.
All they're trying to do is equalize pressure.
It takes a lot of, I feel like everyone needs to be real on in this job.
Real on. You really don't want someone drinking on the job here.
Yeah.
So Bjorn and Trolls are in the diving chamber. They get hooked up to the trunk. The trunk gets hooked up to the diving bell, and they make their way from the diving bell into the trunk to get into the diving chamber. The two dive tenders had successfully pressurized all 3 areas, and they make their way through this. In the middle of them going through this, so one is opening the diving chamber where the 2 are asleep. The other guy is closing the diving bell. Because once that's closed, then they're inside, they can pull it away and then come back later on and reconnect it. In the middle of this, a dive tender released the clamp holding the diving bell to the trunk.
I'm so nervous because I feel like someone's gonna explode, and I feel like I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah, that's exactly what's gonna happen. You really stepped on the story.
Sorry, I'm just very nervous. I'm like, oh my God. I feel like it's because you feel normal, right? But then one weird thing happens and you realize that you're not normal, you're
Totally
super
not
pressurized.
normal.
Oh my God, I can't feel my arms. Keep going.
When this clamp was released, the negative pressure, as 9 atmospheres of pressure rushed out of the chamber into the opening, basically turned one of the guys into just confetti. Because the pressure is trying to equalize. The only way it can equalize by going out. Right. One of the guys was right next to and trying to close the diving bell hatch and got squished right through it with the force of 9 pressures of atmosphere.
Wait, how? Oh my God.
I'll explain this because actually, in case anybody's wondering if I read just Wikipedia articles, I will be referencing their exact autopsy report from 1983 here in a moment.
Oh God.
3 of the divers were super lucky because their blood boiled immediately. They were so all of them died before, it's like the Titan submersible situation. They said that if it was an explosive decompression, by the time they would have understood what happened, it would have been over. Right? Same here. The amount of pressure we're talking about was enough to where they didn't know what was going on. Nobody experienced any pain or anything like that. Their blood boiled immediately. One of the interesting things in the autopsy report I found was they found a ton of fat in these guys' veins and their arteries and around their organs. And it was what on earth happened? Because nobody's experienced this. This has never happened in history before. Nobody knew what was going on. They concluded that the rapid nature in which their blood boiled broke down and denatured the composite material of blood in ways that chemically I don't totally understand, but it converted them into adipose tissue, into fat. It basically converted what was left of their blood into just pure fat. It's I have no idea how it works chemically. That was the conclusion of the autopsy report.
Oh my God.
The one that got it the worst was a diver who was beginning to close the diving bell door. That was Charles. He had his entire body shoved through a tiny opening in the door, which bifurcated him completely in half. His organs, except for his trachea and small intestines and his spine, well, that's not your organ, but they found his spine. Everything exploded, basically, immediately. So you're right, he did explode.
Wow.
Those pieces plus his spine were spit about 30 feet out in the other direction. I found the autopsy photos. So in the autopsy of that they generated for these guys, there's pictures of them. So 3 of them are just weird looking. They just look they have weird bruises all over their body because apparently it just immediately flash fried them from the inside. But they look mostly normal. This guy Trolls, he was confetti. They in the autopsy report, it states that he was delivered in 4 sacks to the coroner.
Oh my God.
There was a picture of his face. There was no bone. Nothing. It was just all you can make out was he had the kind of beard that I have, and you could see that and kind of where his mouth was, and that was basically it. It looked like Leatherface.
Were they inside? They were inside suits?
No, no. Okay, so the three guys that had their blood boiled immediately, they were not wearing suits because the
Right.
autopsy pictures were taken when they were there and they were just in their underwear. I don't know if Charles was so what I remember reading about saturation diving is that the typical protocol is you take all your gear off in the diving bell before you crawl in.
Uh-huh.
So probably not in his suit.
Oh my God.
The ultimate cause of error was the ultimate cause of the issue was human error on the part of the dive tender who disconnected the diving bell before Charles and Bjorn were in the chamber. So one of the tender that did that actually died too because the diving bell hit him with such force and pressure, just like pancaked him completely. The other one suffered tremendous injuries, but somehow remained alive. The families of the divers ended up suing the government of Norway, who had approved this system. There was a lot going on here that I'm not going into because it will take 17 more hours. There was no outside ability to read the pressures from from the trunk to the chamber. Like there was
Right. He should have like had
regulatory.
more
Yeah,
alerts or
we don't
whatever.
know why he disconnected it. Like we don't know if he was just confused, he didn't know, whatever. But basically, there's family suits saying that the government of Norway approved this process. They approved these materials, these chambers to be used. That was in the wrong, and apparently they only finally won judgment in 2008, which is 26 years after the accident actually occurred. And that's been probably the single worst accident when it comes to pressurization and diving bells and diving chambers has ever happened.
Well, I just want to warn everybody that when you Google this, you're going to get a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's on Mars in what's that movie?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh God, it's not Running Man. It's
No, I just had it and I lost it. But you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah, and that's definitely not what happens. What happens is so immediately. And you know what, Taylor? Like I was thinking about because like when I was because that's part of what fascinated me about the whole Titanic thing was like
Total Recall.
Total Recall because the pressure, like the physics of what happens to to the human body in these situations is just you can't believe it, right? Like
Right. And it's not
yeah,
like that far away. If you went like if I walked 500 feet, I'd be like,
yeah,
oh, I just or like whatever. Like I could walk that far and nothing would happen to me. But when you go down that far, it just becomes so like crazy. And then I always think about always, I mean, whatever, the Titanic is crazy, but like all the other stuff, like there were like dishes and clothes and books and people, and it's like everything is like it's like at one point getting soaked in this freezing water, and then also the pressure. The pressure is just like changing everything. It's crazy. I mean, also like if it was safe, I would love to go down there. Oh my
yeah.
God. How cool is that? So like I get the
I don't think it
appeal.
could ever be. I don't think it could ever be like
And it
so
can't
safe where I would do it.
I'd go with James Cameron, whatever he's doing, I'd do. No one else.
Yeah, even that would scare the hell out of me. So that's the thing is like that's why like there isn't an issue with the Titanic and there's not an issue with the people the things that are down there is because the pressure's equalized, right? That's the issue. The issue with the submersible was that inside had a vastly different pressure than outside, but the Titanic, all the water and all the pressure's been equalized. So like there's no
Right,
flush
right, because
factor
it's
at all.
been under there for so long.
Well, it broke up when it went down. So
Yeah.
the Titanic itself, the inside of it was equalizing as the outside was equalizing. So that's why I never went through a crush experience. But
Oh,
makes
right,
sense.
because it was like open.
Yeah, it was open. It was open.
Yeah.
Your problem is only when you're trying to keep the pressure from outside from coming in. But in the Titanic's case, that was a foregone conclusion.
Right. And that, yeah, I mean, I obviously, along with the rest of the world, watched a bunch of videos of like steel drums being like vacuumed closed this week. So,
Yeah, yeah. The second story is going to be a lot more familiar, but I also found it really, really interesting. And I actually picked this one specifically because of your fascination with Russia. Do you know what the K-141 is?
no,
Do you know what the Kursk is?
no.
So the Kursk was a Russian nuclear-powered cruise missile class submarine from the early
Oh.
2000s.
I remember. Oh
There you
God.
go. It was called the K-141. That is a classification. Like back then, or during World War II, the U was used for a classification for German Nazi boats. The K is for Russian boats. P is for
Right.
American boats, so on and so forth. So every country has their own classification essentially. And the Kursk tragedy happened in the year 2000. And that's an important part of what ends up playing out here, because to put things into perspective on why things happen the way they happen, 2000 is about 9 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia was coming out of their USSR state, and they were financially crippled. They're militarily kind of embarrassed because that's what crippled them. They're not doing too good. The exercise in communism didn't play out as expected. The world's looking at them a certain way. And so they found themselves kind of in this weird friendless state, from the year 1991 on to when the Kursk disaster ended up happening. In 1998, the entire world suffered a huge global economic recession, which resulted in dramatic increases in prices for Russia's main export at the time, which was energy. So around late 1998 to early 1999, while the rest of the world was suffering from this recession, Russia began to actually feel a bit of resurgence. They started feeling some pride in themselves, like, oh, we're doing good now. Like, this could be where we need to kind of turn this ship around. And that's an important factor in understanding why things happened with the Kursk the way that it ended up happening in August of 2000. So Russia wanted to show that, hey, we're still here, we still got it. So they put on the largest display of military exercise in decades in the country's history. So they wanted to put together in this August of 2000 this massive display of all of their naval warship power. And part of that was the Kursk, the K-141. Kursk was considered the flagship submarine in the fleet. It had a reputation that, again, is another through line here, fits with the Titanic perfectly because it was considered unsinkable.
Nothing is.
It was considered unsinkable because...
Why would you even say that out loud?
I know, seriously.
You're asking to fucking drown.
The reason that this was considered unsinkable had to do with its double hull design, which essentially meant that if you could breach one part of it and then still not sink the ship or the submarine until you breach the second hull. Again, there's no such thing as unsinkable. Literally everything.
Which is literally what the Titanic said, was like, oh, we have all these different chambers. So if you breach one chamber, it won't go in the next one or the next one. And then it got sliced across the side and it's over.
Yeah, this goes back to my theory that marketing people never talk to product people. They literally never communicate. It's a consistent
You're totally right. Oh my God, never.
Tech and submarine construction.
Mm-hmm.
On this morning in August of 2000, the Kursk was authorized to fire off a dummy torpedo as part of this war game to kind of kick things off. Something goes wrong. At this point, we don't know what's going on yet because I'm describing the events as they're happening. All we know at that time is that Norwegian seismic detectors detected a seismic activity measuring 1.5 on the Richter scale.
Ooh.
2 minutes and 14 seconds later, they recorded a 4.2 on the Richter scale at the exact same spot on the seafloor this time. I'm going to describe what we learned 2 years later about what ended up happening. And the reason I'm going to kind of blow past this because that's not the important part here. Basically, what ended up happening was a torpedo they fired uses hydrogen peroxide fuel source. And with this type of fuel, when it interacts with a catalyst, such as copper, and also copper is what torpedo tubes are made of, the fuel source, the fuel denatures and expands in volume by 5,000 times. This particular torpedo was not well maintained. It was actually 10 years old, which put it well past its service life that it should have been used anyways. It also had cracks in the fuel cell.
Oh my God.
So you have a torpedo that's made of copper. You have a fuel cell that has a combustible material that reacts negatively when mixed with copper, and that has cracks in it. So that's the situation. When the crew fired this torpedo off, they introduced the accelerant to light the fuel source, which expanded the peroxide mixture by 5,000 times, exploding the torpedo and setting a 4,800 degree Fahrenheit fire, which immediately incinerated the entire torpedo room.
Wow.
That was Richter 1.5. That's what was recorded. The second blast detected was the initial blast setting off 5 more warheads, which explains why it was 4 times stronger, basically.
Oh, by accident?
By accident.
Ugh.
And the blast basically destroyed the command center. It blew a hole in the hull in one of its compartments. The ship basically just filled with water and sank to the bottom of the ocean floor. It took a while for the government to realize what had happened and launch a response. But the response...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but didn't we think it was missing for a little bit?
We didn't think it was missing.
Okay.
We didn't think it was missing. They thought it was missing. I'll explain that here in a second too, actually. That's a really good point. So They launched a response, but the response itself wasn't that great. They actually had a submarine rescue vessel, but it was a converted lumber ship called the Mikhail Rudnitsky. And it had a diving bell, a crane, specialized gear, all that good stuff that it needed, but it didn't have the thing that obviously wouldn't have being a lumber ship, which is automatic positioning. Basically, the way it works is that a lot of these ships that have to do search and rescue missions and stuff like that, they have to stay stationary over what they're trying to do that's on the ocean floor.
Right.
And the way to do that is through automatic stabilizing. So when waves hit you, the ship is correcting itself. It's like cruise control for the ocean. You don't have to be like port, bow, stern, blow, 20, 12, all, none of that shit. Like the ship has little projectile or points on the bottom that are kind of doing it for you. And actually what's interesting is that the Arctic Rose or whatever the submersible one was, that also didn't have auto-correcting, and that was also an issue initially because that was the first ship that was on the scene. So anyways, consistent pattern there. 12 hours after the Kursk sank, this ship, the Mikhail Rudnitsky, left port to go help the sailors trapped in the Kursk. By this point, the families were growing concerned, but they'd been told the sub was unsinkable, so very similar to the Titan submersible, they hoped that this was a loss of communication and nothing more than that. The day the Kursk went down, even before Moscow knew what had happened. So this is before. So back then, Putin was president. Well, he will be forever and always. The day it went down, the U.S. knew it was an accident. They knew where it was. They knew it hit the ground. And on that day, this is literally before Putin knows what happened. The U.S., the U.K., France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Norway, all 6 countries reached out saying, "We know what's going on. We can help. We have all the shit. We have the material. We can help out." Russia refused.
Yeah.
They mounted their own rescue, which I will say it was admirable how many things they tried. It really was. They did the best with what they had, but given the nature of Russia coming out of the USSR stage, it was just like amateur hour basically. So they had one submersible that found the Kursk and tried to dock with it, but it couldn't form a vacuum seal with the escape hatch, and it ran low on batteries. And they had no more batteries. Like that was the only. So they had to take this thing back up, plug it in for God knows how long before we could try to go back down again. It's just like stuff like that. The ship, the Mikhail, whatever, Rudnitsky, didn't have the auto positioning, so the sea waves and all that would just constantly move it off position, which was pointless. They tried to lower a diving bell, but couldn't actually position it over the sub's latch because of the non-positioning piece of it. They tried putting a remote submersible back down there to open it, but they couldn't open the latch. The batteries on that one submersible recharged enough so they could relaunch it. They freaking ran the thing into a boom on the ship and destroyed it. And so that had to go back down and had to start getting worked on for repairs. So it took 5 days after sinking before Putin finally said, "Yes, I'll accept help. Not from America. I won't take help from America. I will take UK and Norwegian help, though." So that's what happened. So the UK and Norway put together a task force, a plan to do this. They used a Norwegian ship with a British submersible. It was a joint operation. And it took a couple of days to assemble that. So by the time they actually got to the Kursk has been down for 7 days. That rescue team decided to cut holes in the hull of the ship in compartments they knew were already flooded. They did this and were told that only Russians could go in. The Russians go in. They collect all the classified material. They collect some bodies and come back out. One thing I mentioned here that I really loved was learning like how big of a piece of shit Putin is and how he consistently is a piece of shit. So apparently during this entire time, he was out having an amazing time vacationing, and this ended up turning into a huge PR disaster for him. Eventually, he came back and was like, "I'll meet with the families of the sailors," who just like tore him a new one. The media reported that foreign assistance had been offered as early as the day after the Kursk had gone down, and Putin had been like, he was filmed doing this. He told them, no, they only offered help like 2 days ago. I accepted it 2 days ago. And the media knew that was a false, and the families knew that was a lie too. At one point, this lady whose son was down there started screaming at Putin, and somebody from the government like injected her with something.
I was gonna say, did they all get killed? Are they okay? Because I feel like once you yell at Putin in the face, you jump off a building.
I mean, that was it. Like this woman was like screaming at him, saying, "We're not going to let you get out of here alive, you piece of shit." Like it was like she was going off on him, and then someone just grabbed her from back and just like injected her with something, and she just went limp, and they dragged her out of there. 23 men on the Kursk gathered in one of the compartments, compartment 9, that was slowly filling with water, but was somehow somewhat survivable, and it also had an escape hatch. The problem was when the ship went down, the nuclear reactors were set to automatically shut off. When those shut off, the air purification systems that scrub CO2 from the atmosphere are also shut off. So their oxygen supply was growing limited. In theory, they could have opened the hatch and made a break for it. But they were in the Arctic Sea. So
Right. They
death
can, like,
from
swim
the cold.
up.
Yeah, death from the cold. So they could have drowned before they got to the top. They didn't have to worry. They didn't super have to worry about the bends because they were pressurized to the atmosphere of sea level because they were at sea level when they went down.
Right.
The problem was the compartment was seeping with water, and so their bodies were absorbing nitrogen and their bodies were absorbing more pressure being down there. So there was a risk of getting the bends, but more importantly, they're going to die out of being frozen to death before they got to the top anyways. So that was the biggest issue. And their assumption was, look, we're in the middle of like a massive military exercise. Of course somebody's coming down here. So that was the idea. The contentious part about what happened with the Kursk had to do with whether saving those 23 people was possible if Russia hadn't tried to save face and accept help early on. The answer is, we don't know. And it kind of doesn't matter because if there was a 50-50 chance they could, then they should have accepted the help and should have not tried to save face the way they tried to save face. Notes that were recovered from the sailors were timed and dated to about 6 hours and 17 minutes from when the ship went down, but there's some assumptions that at least up to 3 to 4 days, those men were still alive in there. There's reports that there was banging heard on the hull.
Yeah.
This is like a common thing. That couldn't have happened because again, the ship was double hulled. So like there was no all those rumors of
I feel like this week I've been hearing that about, like, remember about what happened in Pearl Harbor where like people were banging on the hull for like 2 weeks when they couldn't save them.
Yeah. Which could have been because those ships are ironclad. They're not double hulled. So like that could have been a possibility, but in this case it wouldn't have been impossible because there would have been like this sheet of air between that and the outside water. So that part is not true. We don't know how long the men were alive. We'll never know how long the men were alive. It is possible that they could have been alive and saved if they'd accepted help from outside sources.
Right.
So in the end, the families of the Kursk sailors received a total payout of $35,000 from the government. 12 or so of the high-ranking leaders of the Navy were fired, and Putin went on to become the guy we all know and love today. So that is my little tale of two horrific ways of dying using pressure, water, oceans, and all that.
Ugh, there's such a horrible ways to die.
There you go.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Although I would rather die like the Byford Dolphin guys than die like the sailors in that compartment.
100%, because it's also probably dark, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's pitch black, you're starving and slowly losing all of your oxygen, mostly oxygen. You're going to die of not having any oxygen.
And all you smell is kerosene and hear the screams of your sailors next to you. So.
Oh my God, that sounds terrible.
And also, hey, look, I covered a Russian story. So look at me. I'm like Taylor.
I do. I Instagrammed about Russia yesterday because there's so much Russian stuff happening in the world always. And I love talking about Russia. Happy to continue to talk about it. I'm having an emotional crisis watching the last couple episodes of this season of The Great because it's so good and I'm so upset. So like it's just a whole thing, but I love it.
Never saw that one.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good.
There you go. Are you covering Russia today?
I'm not, but I have to pee. Can you hold on?
I can hold on.
Thank you.
Taylor, I can hear you.
I'm muted. Not that you could have heard me peeing, but I just like to mute it just in case.
Just in case. It's always good to be safe.
I pee in this totally different room, but just in case.
I thought there was a bucket in there.
Oh God. Like you remember when you were like, oh, I'd like a